Hey all, Chaucer the Science Giraffe here. I wanted to throw my hat into the critical analysis ring because there are a few things in the MLP analysis community I just haven't heard. So here's the thing, I'm a hopeless brony, I really am, but if there's something I have to fault the show for, it's an unwillingness to let things have weight. Case in point, Somepony to watch over me. Now, I've always been a massive Applejack fan. Before I got into space botany, I grew up on a farm, a horse farm actually, which leads to all of the weird conversations about the show with my mother, plus I'm a sucker for underdogs. AJ has always been the closest of the main six to a Batman-style badass normal. She's faced monsters and creatures oozing with magical power, with basically no arrows in her quiver other than preparation and gumption. All of the other members of the main six have some sort of fancy special ability, but AJ's just AJ. The events of the last roundup even imply that she doesn't even see herself as especially exceptional. That in spite of the whole heaps of praise her friends and the town keep throwing on her, on some level, she doesn't really believe in herself. But that doesn't mean she's going to give up, and I respect that a ton. Unfortunately, the writers rarely seem to exploit her fundamental weakness, and that, in my opinion, is what went wrong with this episode. So, this episode starts out with a frankly excellent moment, with the CMC coming to a compromise between dignity and bouncing off the walls with glee at the fact that the Apple family has decided to let Apple Bloom stay home alone for the first time. Applejack is incredibly nervous about leaving Apple Bloom home alone and goes so far as to leave her a huge list with frankly insultingly detailed instructions. Now, a lot of people have faulted Applejack for this, and all I really have to say about this and the extreme coddling measures that she employs later is, it didn't bother me due to personal experience. I have pretty serious OCD to the point where I considered it a major breakthrough that I didn't feel the need to wipe down the little center bit of the washing machine before I took my clothes out, so I have an unnaturally high tolerance for being nervous about little things. Seriously though, I've had some trouble with my research on this, but if you load your clothes into the washer and they touch the edges as you put them in, and then the washer cleans them but only fills up to the part of the basket with the holes in it, then every time you take them out, aren't you smearing the laundry with whatever gunk was on your clothes before? And I don't know what kind of stuff gets on your laundry, but with me, I'm getting off topic. The point is, I have a high tolerance for ponies being nervous, and it's probably a good thing I chose a job where I have to wear gloves all the time. Anywho, we get a little scene where AJ is convinced that she needs to go back and check up on Apple Bloom despite Big Mac's reasonable lack of concern. Some people have faulted Big Mac for not trying harder to talk to his sister and get her to snap out of it, but again, I'm not sure that's fair. Though her sister was acting odd, Big Mac had no reason to believe that AJ was going to freak out to the point of abandoning her delivery and locking Apple Bloom in a crib. As it turns out, Apple Bloom is pretty on top of things as far as the chores were concerned, and here's where things get messy. Now, Apple Bloom getting on the table in the first place wasn't her smartest or most responsible move, but neither was AJ suddenly bursting in like that, so I'm going to call the responsibility for the ensuing mess somewhat divided. But we can ramble about who was more at fault all day, and like most ramblings of that sort, it's largely counterproductive. What I really want to talk about here is that this moment where the writers could have done something amazing didn't happen. With all of her desperate grabs for control and external approval, Applejack basically has "feels powerless" written on her forehead, and one way that you can end up with that particular neurosis is by having an agency-depriving experience at an early age, like, say, the death of her parents, an event which obviously would have forced her to grow up and start worrying about all of the dangers of the world far more than she would have otherwise. Okay, I know a lot of people think that there's some sort of law preventing the writers from getting deep into her parents' death. I mean, it's not like animated works targeted towards children have ever been able to touch this subject, but even if the writers never do an episode where Applejack goes on some sort of Kill Bill rampage to hunt her parents' killers, though that would be kind of awesome, they can still bring up the anxiety and pain that being orphaned caused her, and this would have been the perfect moment to do it. Think about it. One of the big complaints I've been hearing about the episode is that Applejack was acting out of character, was too over the top, or whatever. But if you just grabbed that obvious knife in her belly and twisted, then, well, whatever crazy stuff she did to distract herself from the pain would have seemed completely justified because it would be clear that she wasn't thinking straight. This could have easily been woven into the next set of scenes, where AJ does increasingly ridiculous things to make her sister safer. Think about how those scenes would have looked if AJ was just a little more scared each time her sister did something dangerous. What if Apple Bloom, a perceptive kid generally speaking, had tried to ask her what the matter was, and AJ looked visibly nervous and gave her some sort of generic half-truth about how seriously she took her duties as a guardian? It would have added weight to the situation, and that would have made everything feel a lot more real. I basically have no problems at all with the next few scenes. Okay, so AJ was a little blind, but Strex makes you miss important details sometimes, so I don't see it as a real issue. The aborted song was hilarious, and those bows were adorable. I think that given some of Apple Bloom's previous attempts to solve her problems with big, risky gestures, that her plan was perfectly understandable and in character. Applejack's realization moment was actually the first time in the episode that I felt the tone get really right. AJ's fear made perfect sense, and the line, "I may never see my sister again," was the closest the episode came to really digging into the emotional core of the conflict. So, a bit of a sidetrack here, but when I was really, really young, I wandered off away from my parents in Central Park, and for a period of several hours, my parents ended up frantically searching for me. My aunt actually found me just before I was about to walk right into the middle of a street. They told me while I was growing up that if I ever went into the Central Park gift shop again, I would have to wear a leash. It never got put to the test, but I could tell they were dead serious. I can only imagine that leaving a child at home for the first time is like a miniature version of that. Sure, you know they'll probably be fine, and you want to give them some space and some responsibility so they can grow, but you'd always be scared for the worst. What if you really never did see that person you love again? That person you worked so hard to take care of? If they could have just infused a little more of the feeling of AJ's panicked search into the rest of the narrative, I feel like it would have vastly improved the episode as a whole. I almost don't even want to talk about the Chimera and the Fire Swamp. Visually, it was stunning. It was imaginative, and it was interesting, and it just sort of fell flat for me. So don't get me wrong, AJ throwing down and winning with preparation and smarts was great to see. I even thought the ricotta cheese gag was surprisingly funny, and honestly, I was even more impressed with Apple Bloom. Like I said, I have a thing for underdogs, and seeing her hold her own, even for just a minute against such ridiculous odds, was a friggin' treat. But, well, the Chimera just wasn't as scary as she was supposed to be. Some people have said she shouldn't have talked, but I don't think that was the problem. The green dragon that terrorized Spike in Season 1 talked, and he was really dang intimidating. What they needed to do was make its descriptions a bit more graphic, in my opinion. If she had just started to, say, debate about which heads gets to each which piece or something, then no matter how incompetent she was, her sheer sadism would have made her more scary. And before you say anything about how that's too dark, we're in a fire swamp, dealing with a creature that eats ponies with a side of pie, okay? Plus, Queen Chrysalis totally sealed Celestia in a coffin made of mucus. Just saying. And now the moral. AJ should have more clearly noted that she pushed Apple Bloom away while trying to save her, and she definitely shouldn't have given Apple Bloom any kind of immediate reward for her actions like she did. Grounding was a good start, but it was undercut by her following statement. To be fair, though, this was a really tough moral. I feel as though the real problem here was communication. Apple Bloom should have dug deeper into what made her sister so antsy about the situation and realized that she shouldn't try to prove her maturity by putting herself in danger. Applejack should have realized that trying to control other people will make them lash out, and you have to strike a balance between taking care of someone and teaching them to take care of themselves, even when you're scared for them. Now that I really think about it, this wasn't a simple situation at all. It's not easy to boil down into a two-sentence moral. And even though I was disappointed with this episode, from a certain perspective, I'm glad they tried to make it at all. Here's to hoping we see a little more polished version of this interaction. Well, I guess that wraps up this first video. I hope you had a good time watching. In the vein of a certain Canis Lupus with a graduate degree, I'd like to ask you, what did you think of this episode's moral? If you were writing the episode, how would you have phrased it? I'd love to read your responses in the comments, and remember, keep your head held high. Booyah! Catchphrase. It's not lame, right? Guys.